Well, welcome back, everyone. I wanted to talk about one of the things that I found very valuable when leaving the organization and just waking up and going through all the emotions that you go through. Getting your story out. I feel like that's very important. When I finally got my story out, it gave me a sense of empowerment. It made me feel good. When I heard other folks' stories, I realized I wasn't alone. And that does help you heal. We had one couple come over last summer, and the wife of that couple, hadn't gotten her story out yet. And she sat here for 2.5 hours and told her story. And when she left, I told my wife she really needed to do that. She had to get her story out. So, with that said, what I've decided to do is have an avenue to where folks can get their story out. Now, there are some of us who can go on camera and not have a problem with it. There's others that they just don't want to do that. They just want to share their stories. So I'm going to start a new feature on the channel, and it's going to be called Watchtower, Will You Listen? And I put a message out on our Facebook group today, toppling the tower globally. And I asked folks that if they wanted to share their story and have me put it on the channel, that I'd be more than happy to do that. So if you would like for me to read your story to everyone, you can send me an email at chipper208@gmail.com. That's CHIPER208@gmail.com. So we're going to start with the very first. Watchtower, will you listen? This email came from Brian. Now, I don't know. I sent him a message to see if he wanted me to share his last name, but he hasn't responded back yet. So I'm just going to say Brian. And here's his story. Hello, I'm Brian. A little bit about my background and how I joined and left the Watchtower. I was born in 1977. My mom was already a JW. Nobody else in my family was. I was born a month and a half premature. Because of this, there were complications with my birth. They had to do a C-section. I even received a blood transfusion. My mom was telling them not to give me blood, but eventually when my dad arrived to the hospital, he overrode her decision. Because of the way I was born, my brain was a little slow. The doctors believed I would be a vegetable. Thankfully, that did not happen. But things were rough for me growing up. I was a slow learner. They placed me in special ed classes. I also was overweight, so naturally I was picked on by kids at school and my older brothers as being labeled the stupid fat kid. The only ones who didn't bully me were my mom and the JWs. I didn't care for the religion, but like most people, I flocked to the ones who accepted me for who I was. As a teenager, I studied and was eventually baptized at 17. I saw JW friends my age get disfellowship for small reasons, which created the first sign of doubts. But I put my doubts aside because I believed it was the truth, and I felt like I owed it to my mom and the congregation. I also had a knack for memorizing and applying scriptures. I loved researching and giving talks. I still had doubts that were slowly building, but I still believed it was the truth. So I put them in the back of my mind. In my mid-20s, I became a ministerial servant, stage and sound servant, book study and service overseer assistant, went to Kingdom Hall builds. In short, I was extremely involved. But in my late 20s, my secular job schedule was clashing with my JW life, making getting involved with meetings difficult. Their rigid need for attending meetings was conflicting for me and feeding into my doubts as well. I think what bothered me the most was reading things in the Watchtower where they didn't know the answer, but at the same time telling us not to question or speculate on their made-up answers, whether it was a passage in the Bible or a Watchtower rule, even though that's exactly what they were doing. The final straw that broke the camel's back was my JW ex-girlfriend. We fooled around one day, and she felt extremely guilty over something that to me felt very natural. I didn't feel bad about it, but out of respect for her, we confessed our sin to the elders the next day. And of course, our stories didn't match up, so we had to give them the details. On a side note, it's funny because while I was waiting for the elders' verdict on me outside of the back room, I could overhear them talking when deciding my fate. In the end, we were both put on private reproof. I already had my doubts about the Watchtower and wanted to be removed as a servant anyways because of the stress that went with it. So in that sense, the timing worked out. About a week later, she broke up with me. I was heartbroken, but seeing how different we were, it was for the best. That's when my doubts about everything really kicked in. From them telling their members not to speculate to their strict rules on natural things such as love and sex, making me feel like I spent my life looking over my shoulder, to seeing friends getting disfellowshipped for simply trying to live their lives. All the while hearing guys like Stephen Lett putting pressure on us saying the end is just around the corner. It finally hit me like a ton of bricks. I woke up. Whenever I questioned anything, my JW mom would make me feel guilty. She would say things like, I'm starting to sound like my dad, or like an apostate. She couldn't be more correct. I am an apostate, and proud of it. Every time I had doubts, the elders or members in the congregation would tell me how proud they were, and my mom was for me staying in the truth so long when so many people my age were disfellowshipped. I received a lot of pressure. When I left, my mom told me that I ripped her heart out. I lost it and blew up on her by telling her how that religion screwed up my life. I must have yelled at her for 30 minutes straight on that day. She didn't say a word. Naturally, I was bottling up many years of angry emotion. In mid-2011, I moved away from the town I grew up in and faded out because I didn't want to give the elders the satisfaction of shunning me and wanted to keep a relationship with my mom. They tried finding me because aside from telling a few people, nobody knew why I left. In a sense, I ran away. It felt like I was escaping from prison for the first time. I was faded out for a few years. During those years, my mom tried in subtle ways to get me to go back, but eventually she realized that I had no desire or interest in returning. I was trying to rebuild my relationship with her for those few years after I left without letting religion come between us. Unfortunately, it didn't work. In 2016, after some convention my mom attended, she told me after talking to her elders, she was shunning me anyways because I was bad association. So I told her if that's what she really wants, then go ahead and tell the elders to disfellowship me. I tried in a peaceful way to get her to see reason, but she didn't say anything. She just quietly listened and said one day I would understand. We said our goodbyes, and I haven't heard from her since. All I understand is that she is a woman with a damaged past, which made her insecure, and that she allowed the JWs to take her insecurity and weaponize her by hurting the people who loved her. And that's sad. One thing that was scary, when I initially faded back in 2011, part of me believed the JWs were right. But as the years passed by after going to therapy and joining ex-JW groups, I learned about the Watchtower being in the UN, the child abuse cover-ups, and much more. Those things were a validating and reassuring feeling for me as to why I trusted my gut about leaving. After initially leaving, it took a few years for me to figure out who I was and to rebuild my life and get it together. I not only had to learn how to be financially independent from JW's support, I also had a roller coaster of emotion to work through. Such a feeling of loss, anger, sadness, guilt, PTSD. But after a few years of getting help in a combination of ways such as therapy, ex-JW support groups, and lots of venting to people who can relate to me, things are much better now after leaving Watchtower. I cannot forget about what the Watchtower did. I will always have scars. But I reached a point where I can live a happy life apart from Watchtower. I'm happily married by someone I love dearly who helped me through a lot of tough times. I met her sometime after leaving Watchtower. Thankfully, she's not a JW. I have a full-time job. It's not the dream job, but we can't have everything we want, and allows me to support myself and my wife, so no complaints. I can also do whatever I wish joyfully without feeling like I'm being judged by Watchtower. I also want to let people know that who are still in Watchtower but want out, with time, courage, smarts, and determination, you can be free to find your own path and have a life after Watchtower. Also, you're not alone in your feelings. Much love and best wishes to you. Thanks for reading. So that's Brian's experience. And like Brian, there's thousands of you that have had similar experiences. So I want to thank Brian for emailing me his story. I really appreciate it. And hopefully that story will help someone out there. So if you like the little series, Watchtower, Will You Listen, and you want to be a part of it, just shoot me an email. And if you've liked the videos so far that I'm doing, please hit like and subscribe and click on the little bell so that you can be notified when I release new videos. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.